How's it going, Reef Keepers? So, if you've been in the hobby for a while, the financial aspect of the hobby is no stranger to you. And psychologically dealing with and or reasoning with and or making excuses for justifications for the financial side of this hobby is going to be something that you're used to doing, right? It's an expensive hobby. There's no way around it. And oftentimes I've wondered, and I think many people have wondered, because you kind of try to bury your head in the sand about it, how much did everything on my system cost? I haven't gotten there yet. The other thing that you wonder is, how much does this cost every month, every year, right? So I decided to go there first because I figured I could handle that knowledge more, with more sanity than I could adding up the total system cost for everything. I'm still in the process of doing that. But as far as how much this 110 gallon WaterBox Peninsula Reef system costs to run month to month and just about every year, I went ahead and, sat down for a couple hours and, made some cards for it. And I added it all up and the results are pretty interesting to me. All I knew going into this project was that this reef tank costs a lot more than this guy. That's my squirrel dog, who his cost for living a year in this house pales in comparison to the amount of cost that I put into fish and coral, right? Although that dog does get spoiled. So I started with kind of the things that came to mind most obviously, okay? So number one, as far as ongoing costs, month to month, year to year, the first thing that you always think of, because usually when you drop money on this, it's not your cheapest thing that you're buying. It's not like refilling your Hannah reagents. It's, a bigger cost every time you have to do it. First is salt, right? So for me, I buy Aquaforest Reef salt, and it's about every 3 months that I have to buy a 200 gallon box of it. So it's about $75 every time I do that. I usually try to catch a sale, which breaks down to $25 a month roughly, and about roughly $300 a year in salt. And honestly, that didn't feel terrible. I knew that salt was in the hundreds, but I was hoping, I don't know. I just had never even, again, calculated that for myself. Like, how much is it really? You don't want to add any of this stuff up because it's so expensive. So $300, not bad. And by the way, I'm keeping a running total on these cards. You'll see it on the right-hand side. So next, another expensive month-to-month thing, and really it's probably this is another like every 2-3 months you have to buy this stuff, is unless you buy it in bulk, right? Supplements, okay? Alkalinity, calcium, magnesium, kalkwasser, all for reef, whatever. And I run BRS, alkalinity, calcium, magnesium on this system, and I run kalkwasser, and I run a small amount of all for reef as my trace elements. So supplements are about $25 a month, or again, $300 a year. So you can see the first two items were already at $600, right? That's that hurts for sure. Next, and this is for my European viewers, I think you guys feel this in a more severe way than we do in America, at least right now. I mean, who knows what happens next year? It seems like every year, right now, I'm sure it's bad in Europe too, but like groceries in America are insane. But it seems like our costs for power, electricity, are pretty reasonable, right? For me, and I have Neptune Apex with EB832s, so I can get a pretty good measure on it. And I looked up my power company's, rate per kilowatt hour or whatever they do to measure it and plugged that in to do the calculation. I estimate that it's about $40 a month to run this tank. And I have to, go ahead and do a disclaimer. I do live, if people are surprised by that cost, it may be that you live in like a larger city or something like that where power costs are higher. But I live in Mississippi. So I live in a very rural place, and it's the state where $100 gets you farther than in any other state, because we have like the lowest average income in this state. So, some of these prices, by the way, for yourselves will probably be higher. I hate to break that news, but and of course, costs will differ depending on what kinds of supplements you're using, and that what kind of salt you're choosing and that kind of stuff. This is just for me, of course. Next, kind of sticking with the utilities theme, water. And again, some people might be surprised. Like I make 10 gallons of water. I make every single week of RODI water to mix with salt, and then go ahead and have, every night a small 1.5 gallon water change. So like, I guess I make like 12 gallons a week or something like that, but $25 a month. And that was, another utility bill that I could check. So now we're up to 665 total. So we're slowly climbing, right? The slow climb was kind of nice for me until I got to this next one. And I knew this one would be rough. And I know even people who manually test are, their stomach hurts when they think about this one. Because when you run out of reagents, which is our next one here, it's always a bad feeling, because you know that you're going to be, okay, how many boxes of reagent do I need to buy, even for a HANA tester, to get to the, free shipping or whatever on whatever website you choose. Testing reagents for me break down to about $25 a month over the course of the year. I use, for my Neptune Trident ABC reagents, so those are like $120. And then I just looked at the current costs of what like HANA reagents are, and kind of guesstimated on this one, how often I, just historically, how often I buy HANA reagents. It's about $300 a year in reagents. But testing your water is something that if you want, certain kinds of coral, you can't just not do this, right? So yeah, to throw that up again, we're up to $965. So we're at about $1,000 already. And we're not even close to done. Next, food. So for me, I do feed several different kinds of pellet food to the tank. And then I use mysis as a treat for my fish that I do like a couple times a week. So that keeps my costs down. I'm sure people who do all frozen, their costs might be increased over this, but it's about $20 a month for me to feed them. But again, it adds up to over $100 a year, right? So now we're easily over $1,000 on the year once you add in the cost of feeding all these creatures. So, by the way, if anybody's interested, I don't feed my coral anything. I don't put like, whatever Red Sea's coral food that's so popular. I don't put any kind of coral food in the tank. I tried that once, and it whacked my nitrate levels pretty quick, and I just backed off. All right, next, now we're getting into things that are difficult to determine, right? And by that I mean there's just stuff that comes up like, oh, I noticed that my dosing lines from my dosers that go into the sump are kind of getting gummy, or they're getting some crystallization in them. They've been on there for months and months and months, over a year, whatever. Oops, I gotta, buy a spool of, of dosing line or what have you. So I categorize this as like an annual cost that's just like a miscellaneous replacement, right? Maybe your skimmer pump goes bad, you gotta replace that, or, one of your heaters cracks, or, whatever. Like, I allotted about $20 a month. Like, there's just miscellaneous stuff that comes up that's just like course of operation things. And I put that at about $240 a year. It might be a little less some years, it might be a little more some years, but it brings us up to $1,325 total. So I figure that's more or less fairly close. And then this one, which this is the final, this category, I put a little bit of, I hope, cushion onto this one. This one I'm calling unforeseen whatever, which means like, I don't know, your return pump dies, or you have like a, massive malfunction with a critical piece of equipment that you have to replace, or you have an emergency in your tank and you're changing 110 gallons of water out, or, who knows? And again, this is another one that like, it might be $300 or $400 some years. It might be hopefully not more than, but it could up to $600 certain years, right? So, and also there's just like, oh, I need a bigger wave maker because my coral's growing out, or, I want a second auto feeder so I can feed two kinds of food or whatever, stuff that to keep your tank running optimal and keep your creatures at their, most pristine, you need to do periodic investments. This is in the unforeseen whatever. Things that arise as you go along that are, fairly big ticket items. I put it at $50 a month, bringing our final total to $1,925 per year to run this system. So if we round it up, say, one emergency was worse than the others, final is about, I wrote on the back of the sheet, final's about $2,000 a year or $165 per month. Ouch, right? That's more than, plenty of my, month-to-month bills. It's not higher than all of them, thank God. But, it's not a small amount of money. It's not an insignificant amount of money. And full disclosure, my goal for budgeting for the tank is everything, including getting new fish and coral, is to not go over $200 a month. So I really try to plan and spread out my expenditures as much as I can, which helps my family, helps keep me in check, and gives me kind of a loose goal. Sometimes I go over, sometimes, I'm, happily under that. But when a coral show, comes to a major city that I can drive a couple hours to, and I have a free weekend, I take that leftover money, in the budget, which isn't a whole heck of a lot. So, $200, $300, $400 a year, that's, I have to just free play and add coral to the tank. And that's one of the reasons I'm so obsessive about keeping my creatures healthy and alive, is I'm trying to stay within, a reasonable-ish bubble financially with this whole venture. And so I'll take that extra couple $100 or whatever, and I'll go get, I'll be very selective and get some very select frags. Or I might, this year I'm already topped out on fish. I'm not getting any more fish. I topped out real quick on fish right at the beginning of the year. Now I'm good on fish for a long time. Now I'm going to focus on coral, later on the summer and the fall. But I don't foresee getting anything new. And it's, if you're reefing on a budget, which is 90-ish% of us, or you're at least reefing with a budgetary goal, which I think is actually what most of us do. We have a loose budget in mind, and we're trying to stay within a bubble around that number. So again, sometimes you fall higher, sometimes you fall lower. Probably we all fall higher most of the time. But, it's kind of important, I think, to actually break this down now that I've done it and understand where you're at. For me, I was again, when you really look at the final total, you're like, ouch. But for me, it was about as bad as I thought it was. And I'm glad that it's now significantly worse, which it easily could have been, for all I knew, because I hadn't gone through this process. But I think, look, calculating the total cost of what you have spent on your whole system, that is an inner battle horror story that many of us are unprepared to face. I fully appreciate that, right? I've just started doing that, and it's haunting me already. So I get not doing that, but I think that there is some real value, the money that's spent on your total system already on lights and, wave makers and whatever, the tank itself, the stand, all the, that's done. It's over. But now that you've got it all assembled, and you're just making periodic equipment upgrades or replacements, and just doing day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month, year-to-year maintenance on the tank, and running costs, I think it is, after you're at least a couple years in with a system, a pretty good practice to just go through the motions of, even if it's just guesstimates, like how much am I clocking in at, right? For most of us, some people have disposable income for this, and I'm jealous of them. You know, more power to you if you do. But for the rest of us, I do think, like, just from personal experience doing this, you know, earlier this morning, it's good to know where you're at. So, yeah, take from it what you will, but that's about what it costs for me to run a 110 gallon Reef system the way that I do it, which I'm not claiming to be some, you know, god tier hobbyist or anything like that. You know, I do some things better than other things and some things worse than other reefers, and you know, I'm trying to find my way through it. I learn every day at this hobby, but you know, now I know where I'm at, and I hope that, you know, me going through with you hopefully provided some kind of insight for yourself. So